how would you calculate that? You personally, how would you decide?
Well, interesting question. I don't know. I'd have to do some research on this.
Hey everybody, welcome to Dapper Reacts to Things 3, which is the show that I just never... I don't have anything else in particular that I want. I am joined, as frequently, by Vishanti.
Hello.
Hello. Vishanti, of course, frequently to help me random dumb stuff. Yeah. By the way...
Because I, too, hate myself and want to be in pain.
We're just a couple of self-loathers. First, I have to do admin stuff things because in effect are still very welcome to chat with Godzilla, chat that AIG or go a bunch of dicks. But they will not be drink triggers. Not in fact Tuesday. And basically, I'm like at the point where I only drink a night a week, and because Tuesdays are the worst. Scott Duke for 199 says AIG is a schmag of schmick. I like that. Which also, by the way, if starts with schm, almost always. Also, while it's not happening right now, at some point my air conditioner is only because, and I'm going to report numbers in Fahrenheit because it's what thermostat uses. Currently it's about 100 Fahrenheit outside, getting to around 110 by the and
that's what, 43 Celsius?
Around that is around 43. We can basically just inch.
Also, the side chat says that your audio is breaking up a lot.
Oh, my audio is breaking up. Okay, well, we'll see what I can do about it. Let me see. Let me know if this is any better. I've readjusted noise gate settings. Unfortunately, because the air conditioning is so freaking loud, I'm trying to figure out a way to make it so when it comes on, you don't automatically hear it. But, yeah. Sorry about that, guys.
I've got pretty decent audio quality in my ears, and I literally cannot hear any background noise from you. So,
well, it's not on right now, and also the noise reduction on Discord is better than the noise reduction on OBS, unfortunately.
Okay.
So, sorry about that, guys.
Says the audio is much better now. So
yeah, basically what I'm trying to say is eventually the air conditioner is going to come on. I have it set to 83 Fahrenheit. Again, I'm reporting those numbers in Fahrenheit because that's the numbers on the thing. So, but if I turned it off entirely, the interior of the house would probably get into like the upper 30s Celsius, like 90s, which, I mean, it's not going to be comfortable for me, and it's bad for the dogs. So, yeah, that's not going to happen. But with that, I want to talk about, so when we left off, we were listening to a lecture about geological bias versus apparently the real geology of the Earth, which is young Earth creationism, because, I mean, yeah, that makes sense. And during that episode, if you weren't here, I was talking about the channeled scablands in eastern Washington as an example of what it looks like when a giant flood has run off from a continent, and how we know and why we know that that isn't a global phenomenon. And so this guy started talking about the channeled scablands as evidence that, oh, geologists are just biased poopy heads. Which, okay, and so they're talking about the fact that the guy who first suggested that the channeled scablands were a flood runoff, he was initially, not believed and ridiculed, which is often what happens to someone who's proposing a new idea that is unusual compared to the previous ideas in a particular field of science. And then he was vindicated.
But unlike some other people who propose new ideas, He actually had evidence.
Yeah, that was the key thing. He had evidence. It's the same thing with like continental drift, which then later got into the more complete theory of plate tectonics, right? Initially, it was a laughable idea, but there was evidence, and evidence just kept mounting. That's not been happening for the flood, so we're gonna just hit play on this, and we're gonna see where this takes us. So NA says, "Is this multi-part series?" Dapper Reacts to Things 2 was the first part of me reacting to this video, but honestly, you're not really missing much by jumping in at the middle. It's basically just unrelated nonsense claims from a young Earth creationist. So, with the theme of geology. Here we go.
Because of their desire to free the science from Moses, just as Charles Lyell said.
Yeah, that had already happened. So, Charles, this is something I mentioned not only last time we talked about this, but also in my discussion with Cindy on Cheshire Vic's channel, on her Debate Hub show, where I said, look, Charles Lyell did indeed want to take the science of geology and not make it anti-Moses, and by Moses, we're here just sort of meaning the Pentateuch or the Torah or the first 5 books of the Bible, whichever term you would like. They basically refer to the same works. Not so much make it anti that and try to disprove it. He was just saying, we can't rely on these books for our geology. Instead, what we're going to do is we're just going to take the evidence as it comes. And the thing is, he's often characterized as this evil Bible hater, but he was in fact a devout Christian his entire life. And he struggled with the fact that the science that he was discovering seemed to contradict a literalist interpretation of Noah's flood. Like, he wasn't happy about
fake
that.
Christian.
Yeah, well, apparently. Look, like I've said, if there's one thing...
That is absolutely evangelicals' favorite go-to thing right now is anyone I don't like is a fake Christian. Mm-hmm. And so, one's a Christian.
Or in some cases, just an atheist if they're not even pretending to be a Christian.
Yeah.
Because
but also, when Lyell is coming out with his whole, we need to free the science from Moses... That's doing something that we like to call fitting your theory to the facts and not starting with a conclusion and trying to back cram in evidence.
Mm-hmm. Although
Hashtag,
the whole calling everyone an atheist or a fake Christian, I saw once it was a creationist who was getting really angry at someone because he was asking them if they're Christian or atheist, and he was like, I'm neither. And so eventually he's like, all right, fine, what are you? He's like, I'm a Hindu. It's like, yeah, buddy, there are options besides Christian and atheist that exist.
Gosh.
Weird. All right, here we go.
In an article published in the Seattle Times in 2003, it speaks to the plight of Harlan Bretz. They said, mystified by the forces that could have exposed such massive features, Bretz set on the early 1920s to solve the riddle. He returned with a hypothesis that was dismissed as near lunacy. In a region that sees less moisture in a year than Seattle gets in a month.
Again, we're talking about Eastern Washington. So just as a little bit of background, this isn't a criticism of this quotation or anything. The mountains that are sort of like the 1/3 from the west to the east of Washington state create an intense rain shadow effect. So on the western side of the mountains, where Seattle is, it rains almost nonstop. I remember when I first moved there, it was just the beginning of something like a 70-something day period of rain every single day. Oof. It was ridiculous. It just rains constantly there. But when you get to the other side of the mountains, it's an actual desert. It doesn't rain there. Mackenzie Brown sent a rainbow for 149. Thank you. Happy Pride. It is, in fact, the 11th day of Pride Month. If you guys haven't seen it, I did, in fact, have a Pride Month special with David P. Neff, where we talked about the words sex and gender, their etymology, and the change in their usage through time, as well as pronouns, why English resists addition of new pronouns, as well as why people feel like using a singular they as a definite pronoun is unnatural, even though they use it as a plural indefinite pronoun in other circumstances just fine.
Unless you're Ken Ham, and then you own yourself by referring to a single person as they in the same sentence that you're saying we can't do that.
So all of that is right there. Basically, I've been wanting to talk about that stuff for a while, but it being June gave me the excuse that I needed to just get off my ass and do it. Well, actually, no, not literally, because I was sitting down while I did it. But you know what I mean.
In a
All right.
figurative sense.
So yeah, I just wanted to give that little heads up about why it is that it's so dry in where the Channel Scablands are versus where they're talking about Seattle, because we're in the same state in the United States, and they have that rain shadow effect. So we'll just keep going. I feel like it's important background that you might not know if you're not familiar with the geography and climate of the West, like the Northwest United States.
Bretz concluded that the entire landscape was carved by water. Bretz, according to some reports, was quickly isolated as a crank, a crazy person, while his critics' theories continued to make it into textbooks. 50 years later, however, Bretz was hailed as a hero, and in 1979, at the age of 96, he was given geology's highest honor, called the Penrose Medal, which rewards one researcher each year for exceptional contributions to geology. 2 years later, he passed away.
I mean, that
It's almost like in the 50 some odd years that he first proposed his hypothesis, it was tested and found to be supported by evidence.
Mm-hmm. In fact, actually, they found the lakes that drained. Because what happens with this whole thing, right, is that this is a sort of after the most recent ice house period in Earth, where there's like glaciers covering large sections of North America. And so what happens is there's a subglacial lake that starts filling up, and it fills up a gigantic area of water because the water isn't coming from across the mountains from the west. It's coming from the north in the form of glaciers and glacial melt. And so this lake gets dammed up by ice. And then when the ice finally melts just enough to cause a breach in the dam, as you might know, once you have a tiny breach in a dam, that's it. It's not going to take very long before the whole dam is just knocked away by the erosion of the water, whether it's made of ice or concrete or dirt or whatever. Interestingly enough, I can actually unironically recommend a Kent Hovind video on this because he did a dam breach for a artificial lake that he had on his property.
Oh,
and it's actually a good demonstration of how quickly a large body of water can drain through just a tiny little breach in a dam. Unfortunately, he seemed to think that it indicated how the Grand Canyon formed, even though the channel left by his dam break didn't look at all like the Grand Canyon. But it's still a wonderful example of a dam break that's in a relatively controlled environment, filmed by a drone, which I was impressed he got a hold of. So yeah, I can unironically recommend a Ken Hovind video as a way to learn something. It's the only one I can think of. But anyway, so yeah, the lake has been found, and we actually now know that it wasn't just breached once. It would breach, then the ice dam would start to form again, the lake would fill back up again. But still, this is water that is coming from the north. And so the original critics were right to say, okay, man, you're going to have to come up with a really good explanation as to why we have all this water, because it's not coming from the ocean to the west. So, and yeah, that's true. And so one of the things that helped make this become a much more well-accepted explanation for the Channel Scablands was indeed finding the lake. Now, I'm curious to see whether or not he's going to talk about the fact that the lake, like the lake bed with shorelines and everything, has been found. I don't think he will. What do you think?
So, I don't have a strong opinion one way or the other. However, I will say that Jake 4D in the chat said the Scablands was a very convincing proof for Noah's flood when I was a young Earth creationist.
Yeah, I mean, so the thing is, it is what we would expect to see after a receding floodwater, right? So if you just took it in isolation, if you were just like, hey, look at this might be from the global flood. My response would be like, yeah, that would be a pretty good explanation for why the Channel Scablands look like this. But the counterpoint is, but that's a very small portion of the Earth. Most of the Earth doesn't do that. The vast majority of the Earth doesn't have these channels like the Scablands do. Why not?
Yeah, it kind of leads you to say that, well, God left evidence in a few tiny isolated places, but allowed geological processes to erase every other spot on the planet.
Convenient. All right, we're going to see what else we got for us. Because I'm actually pretty convinced that he's not going to talk about the fact that the lake has actually been identified. And here's why I think that. Because if a source for the water besides the global flood can be readily identified, it means that there's no good reason to think that the channeled scablands were formed by flood runoff of Noah's flood. So I don't think he's going to mention it at all.
Well, today it is well recognized that the channeled scablands was caused by a major catastrophic flood.
Oh, it's on. Okay, so hold on. It's
about
on
that?
the screen. So we got Lake Missoula up here. So I might be wrong. I might have to eat my words. In which case, sorry, guy I've never heard of whose video this is. And yeah, Venerable Bee points out that also Lake Bonneville contributed. That's true. Yeah, but I mean, Lake Missoula was the main contributor in terms of volume, and you can actually even see the glaciers, which are in white here, as the thing contributing the water, like we talked
I'm
about.
also very impressed that they actually put the Cascades in there because that explains why eastern Washington is pretty dry.
So I don't think this was a map he made himself. I think he actually got this from a regular geology source. I think that's why that is. Although I like Portland is completely underwater. Get out of here, Portland.
Right.
Although it's not like Seattle's doing a whole lot better. It's encased in ice.
Completely under ice. Yeah.
Hey, I used to live just across the water from there. All right, here we go.
A flood that they call the Missoula flood. Called that because the body of water that caused this flooding was located around what is today Missoula, Montana. A massive Ice Age lake formed that was blocked from drainage, presumably by a large glacial dam.
Okay, I don't understand why he's telling us this, because all of this is reasons to not take seriously the idea that this was Noah's flood. I mean...
Is he gonna make a claim that this is the post-flood mini Ice Age?
He might, but then I still have to ask, okay, so where's all the runoff from the actual flood, buddy? Let's see what he does. This is a very bizarre way for him to go for this, as far as I can tell.
That ruptured at some point in time, and the entire body of water, 3,000 square mile lake, plowed across Washington in just about 2 days, destroying and reshaping the U.S. landscape from Montana all the way to the Pacific Ocean. Many of the larger...
It's just a pet peeve of mine whenever anyone talks about part of the U.S. and then just calls it the U.S. as if it was representative of the whole thing. Because the United States is like... It's a good portion of an entire continent. It's just a weirdly large amount of land to talk about as if it were all the same thing. So it's just a pet peeve of mine. It doesn't really mean anything. It's not even a criticism. It's just, it always bugs me a little bit when someone's like, this thing happened in Washington, so the U.S. Like, no.
Scabland features cannot be identified while standing on the ground. And it was, in fact, seeing these features from airplanes that eventually convinced geologists that Harlan Brepps was correct. Only from the air are the rolling hills, for example, near Spokane, identified as giant...
Oh, the Venerable points out that, yeah, the flood took probably more like a few weeks to completely drain the lake. Geologically speaking, the difference between a couple days and a few weeks is really not going to be that significant, so I'm willing to just let it go. And, like, yeah, it was an extremely rapid event. It's fine. I don't know, I'm feeling nice today, so I'm trying not to nitpick literally everything.
Ripple marks, similar to those that can be seen along a beach or a lakeshore, but these hills are 30 feet high and 250 feet apart. Mm-hmm. They just look like hills from the ground, but when they were viewed from airplanes, it became clear that there was a symmetry there that reminded them of ripple marks, and in fact, that's what they are.
In fact, ripple marks are characteristic of flood runoff for floods of all sizes, and the size of the ripple marks can tell you about how much water was going over the area.
The Missoula flood also carved out the Columbia River Gorge. And again, it's just a couple of days. And if you've been to the Columbia River Gorge, you know it's a massive erosion feature. The flood transported tons of material from eastern Washington to the Willamette Valley in Oregon. Large boulders and rocks carved down that were carried down the Columbia River Gorge can still be seen.
Was this a small boulder the size of a large boulder?
In case anyone hasn't seen that, there was a newspaper article headline that said that a falling rock that was a small boulder the size of a large boulder had fallen on a highway and like avoid the area. It was just, what does this mean? What is a large
Oh.
boulder or a small boulder the size of a large boulder? What is that? Anyway.
Near Portland. Large gravel bars were formed near Portland, such as those where the Alameda Ridge neighborhood is built upon today. You can go see some of these large boulders they call erratics at the Erratic Rock State Natural Site in Willamette Valley of Oregon. These are rocks that were carried by this flood from the Channel Scablands area all the way to Oregon. The area where Portland stands today was completely underwater during the flood. Floodwaters were over 400 feet deep and traveling at over 90 miles per hour during the flood.
I don't know if those numbers are completely accurate. The 400 feet deep seems reasonable. The 90 miles an hour, less so, but also, like I said, I don't really care about the exact numbers of this.
Yeah. Well, big numbers are impressive. Knowing a lot of numbers
true.
is impressive. Therefore, global flood.
It's surprising how often I see someone basically just make the argument of big number exists, therefore God.
This is one of my pet peeves about some channels on YouTube, even ones that are pretty scientifically and historically sound. They'll make numbers and distances out to be some massive big deal, as if it's supposed to like blow your mind. This is another instance of that. Floodwaters were over 400 feet deep and traveling at over 90 miles an hour. It's like, okay.
I mean, like, assuming true, it's just like, yeah, it is impressive. I wouldn't want to be there for it, but like,
okay.
Said to have been.
It's the same thing. Real life lore does this quite a bit, and it's nice when he has his research all together and he's trying to communicate stuff to you and you're learning. But he just over exaggerates numbers, distances, and percentages. It's just like,
Bob Knob says that's quite the discharge. Yes, if you have a similar discharge, you should seek medical attention immediately.
Have a similar discharge, you're dead.
Well, yeah.
Equal to 10 times the discharge that is currently found in all the Earth's rivers today, plowing across Washington in just a couple of days.
Weeks, but like I said, whatever. I'm not here to contest that it was a dramatic event, which is really all he's trying to say. It's like, oh, this is a big deal.
Yeah.
Yes, it was a big deal. No one contests this anymore.
During the Missoula flood, a massive waterfall formed where there is now the Dry Falls State Park and Visitor Center. An artist's rendition of the falls, the waterfalls that was occurring during the flood, can be found there on that one of the handrails at the site. Now, just to give you a better perspective on how...
Is this a tourism commercial, dude, or are you trying to prove to me that there was a global flood? Because you're making me want to visit the Channel Scablands, I'll give you that. But it's not impressing me as an argument for flood.
How big this is, I took a video out there the last time we were out there on one of our field trips, but even it doesn't really help you help capture the scale. So for comparison, Niagara Falls is 1 mile wide and drops 165 feet. If you've ever been to Niagara Falls, you know it's a massive, massive waterfall. By comparison, the waterfall at Dry Falls State Park was 3 times the size, 3.5 miles wide and over 400 feet drop. Massive, massive waterfall that formed this enormous geologic feature. And as I pan to the right, you can see one of those massive coulees that you see there.
I just want to know how high a waterfall has to be before it becomes evidence of the global. That would be a good information for me to have. And why?
Well, in 1994, the Dry Falls Visitor Center was dedicated to Harlan Bretz. This plaque can be found mounted outside the facility. It reads, "Dedicated to Harlan Bretz, who patiently taught us that catastrophic floods may sometimes play a role in nature's unfolding drama." And then there's a quote from Harlan Bretz, who
it's true.
Said, "Ideas without precedent are generally looked upon with disfavor, and men are shocked if their conceptions of an orderly world are challenged." Well, note that it took geologists more than 50 years to acknowledge that the geologic features of eastern Washington were the result of catastrophic flooding. This bias against catastrophism in geology is obviously driven by their determination to counter the biblical narrative of the flood of Noah.
Just,
Okay.
oh man, like I said, no one has, as far as I can tell, ever had a drive to disprove the flood of Noah. It's not necessary, right? It's like NASA isn't out here trying to disprove the floodgates of heaven. They're just not. That's not their goal. They don't even think about it. If there were evidence of floodgates in heaven that God could open and let waters from the cosmic ocean above the flood in, we probably would have noticed. You know,
Yeah.
we've sent things pretty far away from Earth. We never hit a dome that had floodgates in it. So geologists are concerned about disproving Noah's flood exactly the same way as NASA is concerned about disproving the floodgates of heaven. It's just not a thing. Nothing indicates it. It's a thing people used to believe, but then, someone checked. That's literally all it is. Someone checked and they're like, oh, nope, turns out, nope.
So I'm going to just drop something in the side chat real quick before you go on so I don't have to retype it 3 times. They're asking about a whole thing that happened on Real Life Lore this week where he had to re-upload a video about the California high-speed rail system. The first video was so bad and so misinformed and ignorant of actual physical geography that a different channel just completely took the video apart. It was like, you realize why they went this direction? There's mountains in the way, and they're not going to spend money tunneling through mountains when they can just cut through a channel that's already there.
Yeah, that sounds a lot easier.
And he listed all this stuff and just, it was a glorious takedown. And it was so good and so thorough and so savage, honestly, that Real Life Lore deleted the original video, corrected almost all the mistakes and his crappy pronunciation of Merced, which he used Merked, really, and re-uploaded it today.
Is it better this time?
Oh, it's better.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Look,
but yeah, it's just
everyone screws
made
up.
me laugh. It made me laugh really hard because, like, okay, pronunciation, I can let that go sometimes because if people aren't from a region, okay. But the thing about, like, why did the train not go straight from LA up to, San Francisco? Why does it detour through Riverside County and Bakersfield? Like, because there's mountains in the way. It's expensive to tunnel through mountains, my guy.
Looking at that state map with just like solid color states and borders is not going to really tell you how to build a train.
Right, and the guy debunking it showed like a map of Europe with all the different high-speed rails, and was like, why didn't they just cut through here to go from, this part of France to this part of Italy? It's because there's mountains in the way. What? So yeah, I did get a chuckle out of that.
Bob Knob points out they're fighting Big Bible. Yeah, well, it turns out that despite the fact that virtually everyone knows there was no global flood, Bible sales are still doing really well worldwide.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Which has and is currently preventing the whole of the geologic community from correctly interpreting geologic features that are themselves otherwise fairly easy to recognize.
I want to know how this guy recognizes things, because I suspect it's the same way that we saw that Cindy was recognizing things, which was you already believe very strongly, you're very convinced that there's a flood. You look at rocks and you think, well, it had to be a flood, therefore it's obvious it was a flood. And then you just walk away. That's it.
Well, with an understanding that this bias exists in geology, we should be very skeptical about the interpretations of fossils that is taught as a matter of fact.
What, bro? Thereby projection.
In the 40s, people were skeptical of catastrophic floods causing significant changes in the geomorphology of the planet. Therefore, here in the year of our Lord 2022, maybe fossils are fake news. That's quite the leap of logic there, buddy.
Oh my god. Wow.
I do like this brachiopod up here at the very top of the Permian, though. It's a very nice looking brachiopod. But here we go.
Today by natural science. Today, fossils stand as the main observational evidence for the theory of evolution.
No. Fossils are at best supplemental, right? The thing is, the main evidence for evolution is indeed the twin nested hierarchies of genetics and morphology, right? When you look and you say, oh, hey, interesting. Tigers and lions are physically more alike than either is to, say, like a mountain lion or a cougar from North America. Do the genetic testing. Oh, hey, they're actually more closely related genetically, too. Oh, and what's this? African cheetahs look and act more like cougars or mountain lions from North America than they do like lions or tigers. You do the genetic testing. Oh, hey, they're also more similar genetically, too. You look at things like, oh, sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, it's like I was telling you earlier this morning, ERVs, endogenous retrovirus insertions, wasn't to me just the nail in the coffin for like young earth creationism and like no evolution. It was literally filling the grave up and paving it over with concrete.
Oh yeah. I mean, it's at that point, it's just a done deal. There is no viable way around ERVs because they're very obviously not a design aspect. There's no good reason for them to be shared across taxa without there being common ancestry. Even sharing mutations in the ERVs across taxa, it's just like, no. So
yeah, we got a long way to go to overcome that one.
So then there is the question, though, like, okay, what does the fossil record do for us in terms of evolution? Well, one, it can elucidate relatives of modern animals who have since gone extinct without leaving behind descendants. So like we have on here, it looks like a Dimetrodon, although I suspect it's actually an Edaphosaurus, and I say that based on the skull shape, but also I don't know who made this. I don't know how accurate they're being. And they didn't leave any descendants that are still alive. And so it's interesting to go look back and say, oh, look at the wider diversity of the group Synapsida to which mammals belong that used to exist. But without any fossils, we would still know that modern mammals are the sister group to modern reptiles, both united within the group Amniota, with amphibians being a sister group to that in Tetrapoda, with all of that having a sister group of the lungfish, which then all of that together, their sister group, among extant animals at least, are the remaining 2 species of coelacanth. None of this would still be a mystery if we didn't have the fossils. The fossils give us a richer, fuller understanding of the actual history of life, but they are in no way necessary to conclude that evolution and common ancestry are true. That is just not at all the case. So yeah, we'll keep going with the understanding that this guy is completely wrong about the degree to which modern evolutionary science depends on fossils.
Because it has been observed that there is a typical order or arrangement of fossils in the layers of rocks we call strata, wherein certain fossils are found typically below or above other types of specific fossils.
No, it's not typically. It's uniquely, which is another important thing, right? It's not that, we typically only find non-avian dinosaurs below the Cretaceous tertiary boundary, and we only find them above a certain stage of the Triassic, which I think it's like the Carnian stage, but I would have to double check because honestly, I don't remember all the stages of the Triassic, nor in which one the first dinosaurs appear. But anyway, we only find them there. You're never going to find a Pennsylvanian dinosaur. You're never going to find a tertiary Pennsylvanian dinosaur at all, and you're never going to find a tertiary like Stegosaurus. Like it's never happens, right? And it's most important going backwards because the possibility of a late surviving member of a group, it's unusual, but it happens, you know. Like at one point there was a tentative possibility that maybe someone had found some Dicynodonts from like the Jurassic period, which would have been very unusual because they were thought to have died out by the middle of the Triassic period. So, you know, that would be weird. But the important thing is that they're never found below, right? You're never going to find an Edaphosaurus in the Cambrian. You're never going to find a woolly mammoth in the Triassic. And it's the consistency of this. In fact, if that were violated, if you found things before they reasonably could have evolved, that would require some really big explaining. I mean, that would bring up the possibilities of things like miracles or time travel or some nonsense like that.
Oh my god. Unrelated, but Theromulus in the chat said that as I watch this and eat chocolate lava muffins, I must ask, is it a sin to pair them with a raspberry liqueur and eat?
No.
You need to understand that dark chocolate specifically, paired with raspberry, is quite literally my favorite thing on the earth.
Ooh, there you go.
Yeah.
Well, maybe you'll have to get yourself some liqueur and some lava muffins.
Can't shove muffin through screen. Sorry, it's like instructions unclear, monitor covered in icing.
All right, here we go.
Evolutionists argue that this arrangement of fossils records the history of life on Earth over hundreds of millions of years and shows that
Evolutionists. You mean scientists?
Scientists. Yeah, it's what that means. And sometimes I point it out, but sometimes I'm just like, I can't every single time. It just happens too often. But yeah, basically he just means scientists. People who aren't intentionally lying about this, or who are simply so misinformed that they find these things. Because like I say many times, out of the 3 options of well-informed, honest, and creationist, you may pick up to 2.
Yep.
You don't have to pick all 2. For instance, you get people like Raw Matt, who's just like, yeah, I'll just take the young Earth creationist. I don't need the other 2. Honesty, well-informed, nah, don't need any of that.
That's why I made a meme for you. I should repost it in your Discord.
You should. Which, by the way, guys, if you want to join the Discord that Vishanti's talking about, that is the Patreon and member Discord. If you are a member, make sure you tie your Discord to your YouTube account from Discord, and that will automatically add you to the server if you're a channel member. If you're a Patreon, there is the Patreon bot that will automatically add you if you tie your Discord to your Patreon account. And it's a lot of fun. We hang out in there. I'm often in there chatting with people. But yeah, it's the most reliable way for my audience to reach me is via that.
There, done.
Nice.
life on Earth has changed over time from simple to complex forms. But this fossil sequence is not truly set in stone.
I mean, fossils are found in stone, so good luck, buddy.
Fossils are frequently found out of place, often by millions of years.
That's one of those things where I'm going to need a citation. I hope we get some examples.
The fossil record, in fact, described by paleontologists, is really better understood as a statement of evolutionary thinking or a model of how evolutionists propose fossils should be.
Okay.
I mean,
Captain Obvious.
in order for it to just be that, though, instead of actually... All right, let me collect my thoughts and think about the right way to put this into a statement. All right, so the existence of what's called faunal succession, which is what you're seeing going up on this column here, where we're starting down at the bottom with things like Dickinsonia and Charnia. And then we go up a bit and we get things like brachiopods and agnathan fish and orthocones and eurypterids and Onglostius and a Daphosaurus and a griffin fly. And crinoid. Ooh, a crinoid. That's nice too. Anyway, this is just the bare observation, which was known well before Darwin. That as you go up through layers of rock, through the sequence of superposition, where you're going from the bottom of the oldest to the youngest at the top, which even the flood model doesn't deny the principle of superposition, you see the organisms contained in fossil-bearing rocks change. They're not the same from one period to the next. And there has to be an explanation of that. And evolution proposes an explanation. But the bare existence of this pattern is not, in fact, something proposed by evolution. It is something that was noticed and remarked upon and like codified in terms of what's always found by non-evolutionists. In fact, in some cases, by people who were strongly against evolution. For instance, that guy, Richard Owen. There you go. He was a strong opponent of Darwin and the idea of universal common ancestry and descent with modification. He was a progressive creationist, something we don't really have much anymore. But he knew about faunal succession, and he knew it wasn't just some plot by the evil atheist evolutionists to ruin God. I mean, he did think that evolution was a plot by the evil evolutionary atheists to ruin God, but he knew that faunal succession was real, and he knew that there really weren't exceptions to it. So, yeah.
However, through insights gained from the Bible, the fossiliferous strata stands as a monumental body of evidence for the global flood.
So here's the thing there. Floods don't sort organisms by environment or by taxonomic position on some tree of life, or anything like that. Floods, characteristically, mix up organisms from all the environments across their entire extent and then deposit them hydrologically. So I think everyone has heard of aerodynamics, right? But there's also a thing called hydrodynamics.
Hydrodynamics.
So some shapes are better at cutting through the water. That's why sharks and dolphins and ichthyosaurs all had similar body shapes, even though they are deriving these shapes from very distantly related ancestors with very different anatomies. So, also, another thing to do with hydrodynamics is density. Unlike air, which doesn't offer very much in the way of air resistance or buoyancy to most objects, water is many, many times denser than air, and so those effects become dramatically amplified when you're talking about water. So, for instance, even though we know that the force of gravity is accelerating, say, a lead ball and an aluminum ball of the same volume at the same rate, the lead ball actually does fall significantly faster through the water than the aluminum ball, because the water resistance is so much higher and the force of buoyancy is also so much higher, both of which end up counteracting the force of gravity. So things that have a better hydrodynamic shape or are more dense tend to sink faster in floodwaters and therefore end up at the bottom, whereas things that are less dense or have less hydrodynamic shapes tend to end up closer to the top. But the thing is, we get things like clams and brachiopods through the entirety of the Phanerozoic. Basically from, not for the entirety, because bivalves hadn't evolved at the very beginning of the Cambrian, but you get what I'm saying, virtually all of it. We get things like, why do we only find pterosaurs, which are at least as light as birds, able to fly, and not significantly different in terms of hydrodynamic qualities? Why are they only during lower strata, whereas birds are also found, from the Jurassic on up, but they're also found all the way up to the top? Why is it that small sauropods and elephants aren't found together? Because elephants are about the same size, shape, and roughly density as smaller sauropods. In fact, they're actually more dense than sauropods. So if anything, similarly sized elephants should sink lower than sauropods. Why are elephants always found above the last sauropods? None of this actually works in terms of it being a single flood event.
The Earth is covered in flood sediments that are hundreds of feet thick.
No. The Earth is covered in sediments that in many cases are hundreds of feet thick, but we know that many of them cannot be flood sediments. In fact, we have a couple examples here. So this is the, I think this is the Temple of Isis in the Grand Canyon, which, spoiler alerts, for those of you who might be into the weird pseudo-history conspiracy theories about North American Egyptian colonies, which I know Ashanti knows about.
Oh God, yes.
The Temple of Isis isn't actually an ancient Egyptian temple to Isis. It's just a fun little name because it vaguely looks like a building. If you look at it from above, it stops looking like a building. But anyway, this big vertical section that you can see about halfway through our picture is the Redwall limestone. It's not a flood deposit, and here's how we know. In order for limestone to deposit during a flood, it has to undergo flocculation, which is a series of events where you have these particles to which the sediments can stick, right? They can flock onto it, if you will. It's a flocculite. And then because these relatively small particles making up the lime are then stuck together, they end up overall having a higher resistance to things like Brownian motion that would keep them suspended in the water column. So they're able to precipitate out of the water more quickly. But you know how much flocculated limestone has been found, Vishanti?
Is it a number greater than 0?
Not to my knowledge, no. As far as I know, none has ever been found. It's been experimentally shown that it could happen, but as far as I know, we don't actually have any real-world examples of flocculite, like bearing limestone, where it could reasonably have been deposited in a rapid event. So, Redwall limestone, not a flood deposit. Also, if you go higher up, you'll get to the Coconino sandstone. The Coconino sandstone is a desert deposit. I mean, and the thing is, not only do we know that it's an aeolian deposit because we have crossbedding consistent with wind-borne sand dunes, but also we have things like raindrop marks at various points through the vertical extent of the coconino. You know what happens to rain when it falls on top of floodwater? It just becomes part of the floodwater. It doesn't leave raindrops at the sediment below the surface of the water. So we know, again, the coconino sandstone can't be flood rock. And that's just two of the rocks here. There are other rocks that are also involved here, like the Bright Angel Shale and whatnot, that also we know can't be flood rocks. Because again, the Bright Angel Shale can't deposit during a flood unless there's flocculation, which we do actually have examples of flocculated shale, but it's not the Bright Angel Shale. So
I got a idea for a new rapper name.
Oh yeah?
Flocculation Flame.
You heard it here first, guys. Snap that name up before someone else does. Here we go.
And laden with the fossils of dead plants and animals, like the layers exposed again here in the Grand Canyon.
Not all of
Not
which are
seeing
fossil
any
bearing.
plants
But...
and animals in that rock.
Well,
Not
okay.
in that photo.
From this distance, you wouldn't. Be fair. And the Grand Canyon does have fossils. I'm going to be fair. It is true that the Grand Canyon is full of fossils. Although some of it's ichnofossils, like the coconino sandstone is actually characterized by a essentially complete lack of fossils in the strict sense, but instead extensive amounts of ichnofossils. In case anyone's wondering, ichnofossils are traces left by organisms rather than the remains of those organisms. So things like footprints, drag marks, burrows, these are all ichnofossils. Godless Granny, which, by the way, welcome. It's nice to have you. Says, I'm wondering if Dapper Dinosaur has seen the new Jurassic Park movie yet. I have not. Honestly, it's not a super high priority for me because while I like the Jurassic Park franchise, I see them as monster movies, right? They're more like Aliens than they are like, say, Prehistoric Planet, which I did see. Which is fine. I mean, I love Aliens. I love monster movies, right? Vishanti, I think you can attest to that. I like monster movies.
Indeed.
But it's hard for me to take the Jurassic Park movies as dinosaur movies. They're sort of like dinosaur themed monster movies. So it's actually not a huge priority for me. Also, I've been hearing some pretty not great things about the movie as a whole. So I'm a little bit skeptical it's going to actually end up being a good movie. So there's a fair chance I might not end up watching it until I can watch it for free. But, oh well. Here we go.
In places, these sedimentary rocks reach kilometers of thickness.
Yeah, and when they're not flood rocks, that tells you something, doesn't it?
And these rocks,
Actually, kilometers.
Oh, hey, he's going to show us the whole grand staircase, if I can talk correctly. Sorry about that.
Rock layers stretch for hundreds of miles, and some can be traced for thousands of miles, all the way from one side of the continent to the other.
Mm-hmm. So
big numbers, big distances. Wow.
Yeah, so the thing is, depositional environments can vary in size. They can be up to like nearly an entire continent in scale, and they can also be extremely small in scale. This isn't a secret. There's nothing about a large-scale depositional environment that itself implies a global flood. So, yeah, I honestly don't know how you're going to turn this into an argument. But here we go.
This map from the U.S. Geologic Survey diagram shows how the layers that are found there at the Grand Canyon, all the way over on the right of this diagram, extend south across Utah through both Zion and Bryce National Parks.
Remind me which direction Utah is from the Grand Canyon, Vishanti.
North.
Okay, I was just double checking. Because I live south of the Grand Canyon, and I feel like I don't live in Utah. I feel like I would have noticed if I'd done that. Anyway.
These layers extend for hundreds and in some cases thousands of miles. The Tapete sandstone, shown there at the Grand Canyon, extends over much of North America, shown by this diagram.
It's not always called the Tapete sandstone in all those locations, but yeah, it is essentially the same correlatable sandstone layer. And why is this? Why are we getting this? Well, there are two main causes for the extensive formations in North America, because in many cases they actually extend over into Africa and Europe. And you guys might might not be surprised to know that that's because of this whole thing called plate tectonics, right? So at various times, the sea levels have been higher and lower. The continents themselves have been higher and lower because subsidence and uplift is a thing. And they've been in different places. So for instance, where we have marine sandstones that are very extensive, they correlate with times when the sea levels have been particularly high. And then the things like the Coconino sandstone that are desert sandstones that are also similarly extensive are actually from a time when the formation of Pangaea caused the largest known desert in Earth history in the interior of Pangaea, because all of it was just so physically far away from the ocean that most of the moisture was dropped from the air before it ever got there. So, of course, when you have low-lying continents and high ocean water, you're going to get most of the what's now continent underwater. And then when that's not the case, but you instead have a supercontinent, which moisture just can't reach, well, yeah, you're going to get an extensive desert deposit. Like, this is not exactly like a hard thing to explain or unexpected. Also, Dia Wing just joined the channel at the level tetrapod. So, guys, if you are a channel member, send him some tetrapod emojis. Actually, I'm actually not sure if Dia Wing is going for him. Let me know. Get me some pronouns so that way I don't use the wrong ones. So yeah, send some tetrapod emojis. Thank you very much for joining at the tetrapod level. If you have trouble linking up your Discord to your YouTube account, let me know, because it should be automatic for you to join the channel with Discord server. If it's not, yeah, let me know and we can try to fix it. Here we go.
And when you consider that the Tapete sandstone is a turbidite deposit.
Okay, we're going to double check on that one, because I'm pretty sure it's not. Tapete. Yep, sandstone. And then we're going to hit turbidite. There's not even an autocomplete for that until I get all the way to finishing the word turbidite. Okay, great. Okay, Answers Research Journal says it's a turbidite. Let's see. Let's go to Google Scholar and see what happens, because no one else is saying that.
Says he, him.
He, him? Awesome. Let's see. Tapete sandstone. Depositional environment. Oh, that's actually from my history. That's not even an autocomplete. I've checked on this before. Okay, Command Cyborg, who's been a member for 17 months at the level of Amnio, thank you very much, says, greetings from 63 degrees, 26 minutes north. Time is currently 21:49, and the sun is just over an hour left to set. And for some geology, almost 1 centimeter yearly land rise. Wow, that's really fast uplift, man. That's some crazy stuff there. Oh, hey, look. Everything I'm finding when I search Google Scholar says that it's a marine transgression. A fairly rapid marine transgression, but that means the transgression progressed up through the land over the course of, like, a few thousand years as opposed to like a few million years. So, oh, Earth has doubled in size over the past 250 million years, says Fractal Earth. Yeah, that's going to be a citation needed from me too. Yeah. Get a source on that. That might make for a fun video. So yeah, literally the only place I can find anyone saying that the Tapete sandstone is a turbidite deposit is Answers Research Journal, which means it's almost certainly Andrew Snelling. We're going to double check on that right now. So we're going to redo Tapete sandstone turbidite and check out the Answers Research Journal and see who wrote it.
Good old Andrew Snelling.
Oh, look at that.
Who lies.
By Dr. Andrew Snelling. Yeah, The Lying Liar Who Lies.
That.
Published June 23rd, 2021. And by the way, you know who the only editor of the Answers Research Journal is, Vishanti?
Andrew Snelling, isn't it?
It is Andrew Snelling. Curious how he gets his dishonest papers published there so consistently when he's the one who decides what gets published. Must be nice to have your own journal that you can just lie in. Oh my goodness. So, you know what? I'll read the abstract, because, you know what? It's not that long. So, we're not going to read this paper, though, because, I mean, it's just too long. Investigation of the nature of the folding of the Cambrian Tonto Group strata in the Grand Canyon necessitates first investigation of petrology of those areas. At the base of the Tonto Group, Tapete sandstone is the 30 to 100 meter thick cliff-forming formation that prominently outcrops through about 500 kilometers in the walls of the Grand Canyon and beyond. Okay, so by the way, remember how he's talking about the nature of the folding in the Cambrian Tonto Group? Yeah, that's the thing that he lied about. That's the thing when he said, oh, it had to form when it was unlithified because there are no cracks in it. And he took a grainy-ass, blurry photo in which he blurred it, just because it was blurry, it blurred out most of the cracks, and then the ones that it didn't, he had his student standing in front of. Like, literally, the only 3 cracks that would still be visible at that resolution and at that level of focus were the ones where he was hiding with just people standing in frame. And I don't know if you know this, but typically, photographs of geological formations in geology papers don't just have people standing in them. You might have a scale bar, but not typically just a bunch of people waving at the camera like dumbasses. Okay. Erosion underlying the Precambrian basement rocks produced the Great Unconformity, on which the Tapete sandstone was deposited as the basal part of the finding upward Salk mega sequence that blankets North America. Mega sequences are a made up creationist thing, but that's still not too far off. And both have been traced across other continents. True. Tracks and traces left by trilobites, which, by the way, characteristically, floods erase ichnofossils. That's one of the ways that you can tell something is a turbidite, is if it has a complete lack of ichnofossils and bioturbation. Bioturbation is just the mixing up of sediment by living organisms caused by things like roots, burrows that get infilled, animals digging around for food that aren't making necessarily a burrow, but just like furrows and whatnot. That's bioturbation. So if you find ichnofossils or bioturbation, be pretty darn sure you're not looking at a flood rock. So we already know it's not flood rock. Fraction traces list by trilobites and other invertebrate are fossilized in the Tapete sandstone, which consists of 0.3 to 1 meter thick non-bioturbated beds, strongly cross-laminated with shallow clips characteristic of water transported of the sand in many lens shapes, scour, and fill channels. Let's see. So actually, we're gonna check Google Scholar, and we're gonna check. Let's see. Tapete sandstone bioturbation. We're gonna see if it's actually free of bioturbation. Okay, this sounds interesting. Paleozoic invertebrate ichnology of the Grand Canyon National Park. This is by Ann Miller, Lorenzo Marchetti, Heitor Francini, I think. I don't really know how to say it. Sorry, Italians. And Spencer G. Lucas. Okay, so we're going to look for tapetes on this. Come on, guys. Okay, the Tonto group consists of 60-mile formation, Tapete sandstone, Bright Angel shale, historically included in only Tapete Bright Angel shale. The formation is defined by lithology and because of extensively. Okay, that's great. Let's see what it is. Bioturbation. Help me out, guys. Tapete sandstone is typically interpreted as representing shallow marine sand environment under significant tidal influence, where more terrestrial environments were toward the base, where the formation has been more continental overall, perhaps fluvial braid pan. Tell me if there's bioturbation, guys. Help out. All right, you know what? I'm giving up looking. I'll just take Andrew Snelling's word for it, despite the fact that he's a gigantic liar that there's no bioturbation, and just point out that ichnofossils are also destroyed by floods. So anyway, yeah, we know it's not a turbidite deposit. It has ichnofossils. That's really all you need. Here we go.
A type of sedimentary rock that forms through underwater landslides called turbidity currents. The evidence this provides for a continental-wide catastrophe is overwhelming.
If it were a turbidite deposit, then sure. It's not, so no.
Well, this type of continental-wide coverage by fossil-bearing rocks is the norm.
To some extent. I'll note that a lot of these areas are less than, continent-wide in span. But, yeah, there are a lot of continent-wide fossil-bearing areas because, again, sea transgressions and Pangea were things.
It's not an isolated incident. It's the norm, as shown in this map by the U.S. Geological Survey, and is, in fact, a law of stratigraphy called the law of lateral continuity. Flood deposits blanket the continents, except where erosion and uplift have removed those layers. But if second...
That's not always the case. There are, in fact, areas where formations end, not because erosion eroded them away, but because they only were deposited in that area. One good example from the Grand Canyon itself is actually Surprise Canyon. Yeah, my audio is bad because the AC kicked in because it hit 83. Sorry about that. I have the AC set to 83 degrees Fahrenheit because it is currently 105 degrees Fahrenheit outside, and if I don't have it turned on, it's going to be a disaster. So actually, you know what we'll do? We'll take a quick break. Hopefully the AC will cut out, and then when we come back, we'll talk about Surprise Canyon from the Grand Canyon. How does that sound, everybody?
Sounds good to me.
All right, well, let's do it then. All right, we are back. I got myself a new drink with the AC cycle, and we are back. So, Surprise Canyon is a really cool formation. Actually, I don't know if it technically counts as a formation, but I'm using formation in sort of like the lowercase f version, right? So in Surprise Canyon, it's actually a canyon within a canyon. So you can find the rocks of the Surprise Canyon in the Grand Canyon. And it's a paleo canyon. So there was an ancient canyon that formed when the rocks of the Grand Canyon had already been lithified. And so this is an erosion feature in those rocks. Again, younger creationists also like to sometimes deny that there are erosional features within the rock record. That's not at all true, not even close. This is a great example of one. And in it, there's actually sediment that fell into the canyon and filled it in after it stopped eroding, but that don't exist outside of it, because again, it only fell into the canyon. And then I guess on top of that, but the fact that it doesn't extend horizontally very far isn't because it was eroded away from there, it's because it infilled a canyon. This is a great example of both a paleo canyon showing that how do you get a canyon during a deposition by a flood in the middle of the flood? I don't know how that happens. But also, it's an example of rock that only exists in one location, not because of erosion, but simply because that's where it was deposited. It just wasn't deposited everywhere. So we're going to keep going with this now that we've heard about Surprise Canyon. And I do encourage you guys, do look it up after this. It's a really cool feature. I actually don't know where in the Grand Canyon to go to actually look at it physically. But I have read up on it, and it's really, really cool. It's got its own little like tributary canyons and everything that you would expect from a canyon. Very neat.
Geologists could not recognize the Missoula flood due to its immense size. Consider, how can they recognize the geology of a global scale flood? The Missoula flood, remember...
Go ahead, Vishanti.
Skepticism.
Yeah, so here's the thing, right? We know what floods look like, and we know what global means. So if you saw signs of a flood everywhere, that would be indication of an everywhere flood, hence a global flood. It's that simple, right? It really is, right? Like we recognize the global impact of an asteroid strike in the Yucatan at the KT boundary because we know what asteroid impact ejecta look like. You know, things like tektites and high iridium levels. And we recognize that globally. Therefore, it was a global in scope impact event that caused tektites for a very large portion over the Earth, not all of it, but then also a global layer of increased iridium concentration. So we took a thing, we're like, hey, we know what it looks like when this happens. It's happening all over the world. Therefore, there was a global scale event of this kind. It's literally that simple. We know what floods look like. We know what single events look like. They're correlatable horizontally. Or sorry, they're correlating to a certain vertical position across the entire horizontal surface where we have rocks of the right age. And it's the same kind of deposit. If there were an entire horizontally and globally correlatable flood deposit, then okay, yeah, that would be evidence of a global flood. That's all it would take. Just give me that flood deposit. There isn't one.
Escaped their notice, as it says in 2 Peter 3-6, because of their incorrect worldview.
No, look.
No.
Geology is primarily characterized by steady forces, is not a worldview. It's a scientific theory that still is actually basically true. It's strict uniformitarianism hasn't been a prominent part of geology in over 100 years. What we now have is what's called actualism, that recognizes that while most geological processes that are evident in the Earth took place at a relatively steady pace, there were in fact catastrophic events like volcanic eruptions, large floods, asteroid impacts, and whatnot that did significantly affect the geology of the world. This is not news to geologists. They're not biased against disasters. They're biased against unevidenced disasters. And because we know that disasters happen less frequently than non-disaster periods, the presumption is always that there wasn't a disaster until you can show that there was one, because that's more likely. Because again, most of the time there isn't a disaster happening in any given area. Like, chances are where you are right now, you, my audience, it's not currently a hurricane, and there aren't currently any tsunamis, and there aren't currently volcanoes erupting and showering you with hundreds of feet of ash. I say that in part because it's most likely true at any given place in the world, and also because if it were true, I feel like you shouldn't be here watching me. You should be trying to save your life. So, if that is true for you, stop it. Stop watching me. Go get yourself to safety. If that's not happening, though, do keep watching. We're going to hit play.
And they are certainly going to deliberately overlook the fact that the entire geologic record is due to a global scale flood.
If that were the case, you would have to present evidence that it were, and instead just pointing to rocks and saying, see, that's turbidite because Andrew Snelling says so, isn't sufficient. Andrew Snelling is a known liar. Nothing he says is evidence of anything because we know he's dishonest. Now, if he says it, that doesn't make it wrong, but you're going to need better evidence. Anything by Andrew Snelling can legitimately just be thrown out because he's a known liar. Now, if he cites other people, you can check those citations, right? But then you're just checking with those people. You're not checking with Andrew Snelling. Andrew Snelling is literally not evidence of anything, except, I guess, his own existence.
Well, what this diagram that I'm showing you here actually is a diagram showing the layers of the fossil record that are on the surface in North America.
No, it's the layers of the geological strata in which the fossil record is found. Not the same thing. You can't use these words interchangeably, buddy. All right, here we go.
The fossil record that is more formally called the geological column.
No,
now, natural science argues that these...
Holy crap, man. These are not interchangeable terms.
Wow.
They're related. My goodness. Now I wish I did have alcohol. Okay. The fossil record is just the fossils. The geological column is the rocks contained in the fossils. So when you find a fossil in, say, Lower Cretaceous rock, that fossil is part of the fossil record of the early Cretaceous. And the way you... And the rock itself is part of the geological column in that thing called the Lower Cretaceous. Even the difference between lower and early are not the same thing. Lower Cretaceous is about the rocks. Early Cretaceous is about the time when those rocks were deposited. You can't just interchange these words willy-nilly. There's a reason that scientists use precise definitions for all these things and why they're not interchangeable.
Layers represent different geologic periods of time, separated by millions of years.
Not always separated by millions of years. Sometimes they're, one right after the other. In fact, the geological column is, in fact, one right after the other. Once the Devonian ends, the Mississippian starts. Once the Permian ends, the Triassic starts. There doesn't need to be a gap. But there are, in fact, gaps in some areas called unconformities.
However, take a look at this map, and I want to point out something to you here, just how much geologic time is missing over much of it. Look at where the red is up there in Canada, and look where it is on the the legend there that's at the right. Look what the red is labeled on that legend, and look where it is there up there in Canada.
Mm-hmm.
So, in their interpretation...
Notice something, that the region that's largely red and orange, followed by blue and purple, is what was covered by the Ice Age.
Yeah, the thing that had most of the sediment scoured recently away from it.
Weird.
Yeah, funny how that is. It gets younger as you go north, which is also the time that it spent the most under glaciers. More as you go north, more time under glaciers. Yeah. Who would have thought that glaciers might scour away the top layers of sediment? It's not like gigantic piles of ice scraping across the land are going to cause any erosion. Definitely not something that might cause like fjords or anything.
All of the geologic periods above those red layers is missing throughout the entirety of Canada. You're talking...
Yeah, dude, because it got dropped.
There was an Ice Age there.
It's like that rock is literally scattered all over like the United States in the form of boulders that got there because of glaciers. It's not like we don't know what happened to it. My goodness. And the thing is, the Ice Age isn't something that, like, creationists believe in an Ice Age, right? They think there was only one, and it happened a few hundred years after the flood, but still, it would have scoured the sediment off of the land. My goodness. Like, I'm not a geologist, but this isn't exactly like rocket surgery or anything. And yes, I said that intentionally.
About 2 billion years of geologic time is missing from all of that area up in Canada.
I mean, it's only missing if you don't go climb a boulder in Massachusetts.
And again, it's an ice age.
Yep.
Was there.
Mm-hmm. There were these things called glaciers. They're like, really heavy rivers of ice. Yeah, they tend to scrape things up a little bit. And yeah, the Venerable Bead is typing in all caps, and that is appropriate because the Venerable Bead is talking about glaciers, and like there was a glacier that, yeah, exactly.
That is covered in red. That's a massive amount of missing geological time. However, if we interpret the fossil record from within the biblical worldview, then the sorting of fossils.
My goodness, here we go, guys. We're going to get into his explanation for why fossils are sorted the way they are, which is not hydrologically, spoiler alert. Okay.
So he needs to explain why there's a giant scraped off missing section around Canada and eastern, like middle, what is it? Upper Midwest around the Great Lakes.
Yeah. Yep. Like, why does it progressively get younger as you go north? Because glaciers are a great explanation, but I'm curious to see what his is. Maybe as Bob Knob says, it all just comes back to capitalism. The capitalists sold all the rock in ancient times. Ancient capitalists sold it to space capitalists, and then they went off to go build a new planet out of the rocks that they got sold by the Earth capitalists in ancient times. I mean, that's at least as reasonable an explanation as anything he's about to give us.
Ancient aliens confirmed.
Ancient capitalist alien.
That has been found by paleontologists is almost certainly due to the successive destruction of various types of habitats during the global flood.
Okay, so here's the thing, right? Floods characteristically mix up paleo environments. Plus, while it is the case that the earliest fossil-bearing strata are in fact marine and seashore areas, and then the invasion of land happens apace, we have like Cretaceous and Tertiary marine sediments, right? It's not like, oh, hey, there are no marine sediments above like the Paleozoic. Nope. They're marine sediments the whole way up. They preserve things like fish and trilobites and clams and cephalopods. But, yeah, same thing with marshes. The whole way up, we have marsh deposits here and there. In fact, if you've heard
layers all the way down, that really is confirming it is turtles all the way down.
Yes. Although, interestingly enough, he's got a weird mix of things here. So, like, if you look below this fish that's next to this, looks like a bird. I think it's actually a bird fossil. Below that is an early, like, Permian animal, and then next to it is a turtle that looks like it can't be from any earlier than the Jurassic period. So even with this, he's screwing up the order that the fossils are actually coming in because he doesn't know what he's doing.
As the floodwaters rose higher and higher on the earth, it destroyed lower habitats and then higher habitats and then ever higher habitats.
Okay, so why is it that Eudimorphodon is found down in the Triassic? Whereas we never find, say, an albatross down there. Or even just like, any birds at all. Why is it that some flying animals were able to escape this flood?
Because birds flew around until they ran out of gas, remember?
Why didn't Eudimorphodon do that? It could fly. Heck, we'll pick an even better flyer. Why didn't Pteranodon longiceps? Why didn't it do that? It was
because reasons.
Oh, right, of course, reasons. Mr. Lizard said, "Where are the mosasaurs in this?" As a lizard, I can understand why you would ask that question, and the answer is I don't know if he's going to talk about mosasaurs. Sorry, I wish he would because mosasaurs are really cool. But also, I'm still hoping that some verandid lizards take to the water and we get Mosasaur 2.0 Electric Boogaloo.
These habitats that we call biomes. And that's almost certainly what we're looking at. What was responsible for the sorting Sorting of fossils, the reason why some fossils are found typically below or above other fossils is because the flood, remember, was an extended event. It wasn't just a 40-day event. That 40-day reign tends to stick in our mind. It lasted for 150 days. From the 17th day of the second month of Noah's life to the 17th day of the seventh month of Noah's life. 150 days was the extent of the time that was required for the flood to eventually cover the mountains. 150 days.
I forgot. It also includes apparently worldwide tsunamis.
Yeah, there's another thing. Tsunamis are also not known for carefully sorting organisms by environment. So we have a twofold problem, right? The proposed mechanism for how all this stuff was deposited doesn't actually result in environmental segregation when it happens observably. So you would have to come up with basically entirely new deposition loads for floods and tsunamis that no one has ever seen to get this careful environmental gradation. Another problem is that we have mixes of different environments all throughout. So, look, for instance, if you go to just Colorado, right, you can find areas where there's terrestrial deposits, marine deposits, terrestrial deposits, marine deposits, and then more terrestrial deposits. How does that work with rising floodwater? I don't know. And I'm not saying like these are marine deposits like it's a maybe. We're talking like it's got things like shark teeth and mosasaurs and sea turtles. This isn't like an ambiguously marine deposit, right? Like this is pretty darn sure this is a marine deposit in this part of Colorado here. And also, like we said, animals that live in the same biome at different points in time through the geological column, right, are separated. So, for instance, we have animals in North America like camels and deer that were living in basically the same environment as things like Edmontosaurus or Pachycephalosaurus. Why aren't they together? Like, that's the question. Why not? Why? There's no answer that I've ever been able to find. Creationists basically don't do any kind of biogeography studies, and they do not get into the details of exactly how these formations happen. They're just like, sorting. It's totally okay. It's fine. Just don't worry about it. Just shut up.
It gradually rose higher and higher on the earth. With this in mind, let me show you something interesting. Okay? Next to this map, that again shows the layers of the fossil record that are on the surface in North America, I'm going to place a map of the present-day biomes, or the types of habitats that are found in North America. Look at this.
Okay.
Look at how...
Okay, so I'm seeing that
Those
areas...
don't really line up that well. I mean, there's
Yeah.
some commonality, but...
Basically, what I'm seeing is some areas that have more extensive erosion correlate to where the biomes are, which, spoiler alerts, since erosion correlates well with both elevation and latitude, you would expect it to also correlate in some cases with biome. Weird, right? Like, we would expect a loose correlation in some cases between amount of erosion and currently existing biome. That's literally all that you're looking at here is, yeah, there's a little bit of correlation in a few places. But, I mean, look at the southern coast of the Gulf of Mexico, and then up. There's a whole lot of geology there that is not tracking onto the biome at all of temperate areas and north and forested areas, right? Like, or you look at Florida, the tropical humid forests, no correlation. You look at the Yucatan, no correlation. Basically, the only big correlations are the Great Plains and then sort of the deserts and mountains to the west of them. Again, because, erosional features. And then you go north and you see things like northern forests and the Hudson Plains correlating with, where the glacier erosions were, which again correlate with both latitude and elevation. So again, that's the kind of correlation we expect to see. This isn't rocket science, guys. It's really not. The amount of correlation is the amount we should expect to see, given what erosion just is and what caused it most recently. And Mr. Lizard points out, don't you know, Dapper, all dinosaurs lived in swamps according to YECers. They never lived in places like deserts. Yeah, as a Ceratosaurus, I'm going to have to press X to doubt on that one. Because I will have you know that I hatched in a desert, gosh darn it. Although there were lots of marsh dinosaurs. That is also true. All right, here we go.
Closely, those maps align. That's because that is all the fossil record is. It is the destruction of successive habitats by rising waters during the biblical flood. See how
No, wrong.
We already covered that. It's
interesting, right?
there's a few loose correlations, and that's it.
Like the strata, I can speak directly to this. There's a big like horseshoe bend that cuts through like eastern Tennessee down into Mississippi and Alabama and then meets up with the Appalachian Mountains. That is an extremely fertile part of soil. And there's a lot of history there as to like how that affected economy and current demographics. So in his little like biomap, that entire area with all those different strata, it's just one green blob.
Yeah. Well, guys, actually, I think we're going to actually end up wrapping this up in a few minutes because, well, the increasing heat is actually causing problems for my computer. Never mind me. So, unfortunately, I think we're probably going to wrap it up after, I think we're going to let him get through the end of this map section. We're going to respond to that, and then we're going to start wrapping up. Does that sound good to you, Vishanti?
Yeah.
Okay, so, sorry about that, guys.
Well, we also find ocean fossils everywhere.
You know what? We're going to leave him with that because I'm very curious to know how it is that he's going to say environmental sorting matches well with oceans going everywhere. Because those sound like contradictory points to me, but what do I know? Okay, so guys, I'm not sure when the next one of these is going to be. It might actually just be on Saturday. Again, Dapper reacts to things it's literally just the thing that I do when I want to do something, but I don't have something else. So, for instance, if a regular guest for a Tuesday night stream just can't make it and I can't get a replacement, I do Dapper reacts to things. Or if it's just a random Saturday and I want to do a stream, but I don't have anything in particular that was already scheduled, Dapper reacts to things. So this is an irregular series. Don't count on it being back on a particular day, but it will come back. I will keep doing it. Shanti, do you have anything you want to plug?
Nothing specific is coming to mind, but you have been giving me some more good ideas for things that I could do in terms of live debug. So
I am full of ideas. That is one of my things. Okay, well, let's take a look at the calendar for my channel and see what we got coming up. Thank you, Windows. I know that there is an ongoing heat wave alert. I would prefer to actually just see the temperature, though. 106 right now. Nice. Okay. So today is the 11th. On the 14th, we're going to do Kent with Bent with Maddie from Science Side Up. It's going to be my birthday stream. After that, I'm going to do a game stream just on the channel just to hang out with you guys instead of retreating off to my private Discord server and watching Power Rangers. Instead, I'm going to do another stream here where I'm going to just stream some games and it'll be fun. There is a poll on that Kent with Bent to vote for which game I'm going to play. I might actually end up ending it and also putting out a poll on the channel community tab. And feel free to double vote because I do not care about the integrity of this vote. It's literally just for me to play a video game, so who cares? Let's see. That is the 14th. The 15th is going to be Power Rangers Jungle Beast over on Top Hats Off. Go check that out. Hopefully we're going to rescue the White Ranger. The 16th is going to be the first episode of a two-part series about whether or not dragons lived with humans during historical times. Not by young Earth creationists, but instead by a pseudo-historian who likes stuff like ancient aliens and nonsense like that.
The answer is yes, humans lived with dragons. Fire-breathing dragons.
No, not so much. Let's just say this
because I want it to be true.
Well, let's just say
Checkmate.
this. One of his pieces of evidence for dragons living with humans is a bestiary from the early modern period that also had an animal with scales, a spiked penis, the breasts of a human woman, and the face of a person.
Kinky.
Yeah. I'm going to go ahead and say that that's probably not a thing that ever existed, and therefore you should not take this book seriously.
Counterpoint.
Fair enough. So that's Thursday. The 18th might actually end up just being another Dapper Reacts to Things. Originally, it was going to be a Leaving Young Earth Creationism, but the guest has requested that I move that to the 25th because he needs to do something or other with his fiance. I don't remember exactly what. Maybe it's getting married. I don't really know. It's not my business. Then the 21st, we should have Jackson with Jackson. Wednesday the 22nd will hopefully be Guns, Magic, and Steel over on Cheshire Vic's channel. That's the D&D actual play show that we do on her channel, which is run by Maddie from Science Side Up. The 23rd should be the next episode of that Dragon series, which will be the finale. And then the 25th will hopefully be that Leaving Our Earth Creationism. And that's about as far ahead as I want to look. That's 2 weeks. I think that's enough notice. Guys, if you do want early access, I have about 10 videos up for early access that you can get as a channel member or a member of the Patreon. So do consider that if you want to help support the channel. It really does help, like a lot. It's much more reliable than the YouTube ad revenue, which can fluctuate 40-50% sometimes month to month. It's wildly unreliable. So that really does help me be more stable and have a more like able to do things like budget, right? I can't budget on the basis of YouTube ad revenue. It's too inconsistent. So if you do want to help out, channel memberships and the Patreon are a big part of the stability of this channel and its ongoing just staying on the air. So with that, I'm going to leave you guys. We're going to go to the end credits. Bye, everybody.
Thanks for watching, but before you go, I just want to say a special thank you to my channel members and my patrons, especially those pledging $20 or above. Work in Progress, Benthoven, Cynically Skeptic, Denny5252, Ian Chen, John Ackerman, Chris Love, Landon Knoll, Yapetus, Mabbity Babbity, Sphincter of Doom, The Venerable Bede, and Patrick Dennis. As you probably know, YouTube is a very volatile platform, and from month to month my income on the channel can swing wildly. But the people you see on screen are directly supporting so that I don't have to worry too much about that, and the channel can keep going as it is, and perhaps even improving. If you'd like to join this team, there are links below to join the channel or in the description to join the Patreon. The Patreon starts as low as $1 a month, and the channel memberships start as low as $1.99 a month. On Patreon, you can even get a discount for pledging annually. If you do decide to pledge, you'll get access to an exclusive Discord server just for channel supporters, as well as early access to all of my pre-recorded videos, often up to 2 months in advance. Higher tiers will unlock even better perks. Now, if an annual or monthly pledge isn't right for you, but you still want to support the channel, there is a merch store down in the description, as well as an Amazon wishlist, just for me. And if financial support isn't something you can or want to do, then if you still want to help out the channel, please just like and share these videos and make sure you comment on them. It really helps the channel out. Thanks again for watching.